What's real? What is it not? We're going to get into it and talk about it, but let's clear the air for good first, because this subject has been hidden for years under some of the craziest claims, fake pictures, half-truths, and hype the crypto world has ever seen. Still, something very real has been going on behind all that noise. Slowly, quietly, one step at a time, right in front of everyone. A lot of people missed it. A lot of people still don't get it. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain. People only want to know one thing about XRP private ledgers: what they are, how they work, why they exist, and if crazy prices like 327,000 XRP are real. The truth. Let's do this. If you find this breakdown helpful, please like it and share it with someone who needs it. Now, let's get back to the beginning of this talk. The first big spark came from Brad Garlinghouse himself when he talked about why Ripple had to create temporary private networks with permissions for banks that didn't want their transactions to be shown on a public ledger. In all honesty, you can see why if you picture the phone call he talked about. One of the largest banks in the Middle East is one of Ripple's first partners. They go live. Then there was fear. A banker says that Ripple is very angry. People can see what I've done. I do not want other people to see my activities. Think about being on that call. Imagine being on the team that forgot that banks don't really want everyone to see how they move money around. That moment was the unintentional opening to the whole talk about the private ledger. Banks need privacy, not because they're hiding something bad, but so that rivals can't look at corporate flows, internal transfers, and liquidity moves. This is the case whether people like it or not. Ripple did what made sense. They made private, limited versions of their technology so that banks could try, pilot, and carry out transactions without anyone else seeing them. Brad gave a clear explanation. The public XRP record is there. Then there are private temporary blockchains, which are separate routes between banks that are cryptographically signed, hold value in escrow, and release value all at once to make sure settlement always goes through. It wasn't some kind of plot. It wasn't a secret band of rich people. As the banks put it, we like technology, but we need privacy. This was the start of the whole secret ledger myth. Hold that thought for now. We'll get to the big question in about 2 minutes. Does XRP get used in these secret ledgers? If that's the case, does that price match the general price? First though, as stated, I'm putting this right here. As part of building CBDCs, they were testing a private form of the XRP ledger just for central banks. This wasn't just a guess, it was true what they said. This was said straight out, and that immediately made the talk longer because now it wasn't just banks that needed protection, it was whole countries. Along with that news came something that many people still get wrong today. This is the private CBDC ledger. It is based on the same code as the XRP ledger, but it is not the public XRP ledgers. CBDCs aren't being made directly on the XRPL mainnet by central banks. They're making them on private secure networks that are meant to protect privacy, allow for growth, and provide control. This is where a lot of the misunderstanding and myths start to take off. People began to wonder if the secret ledger used XRP since it was a separate network. Does XRP serve as a bridge asset for CBDCs? When you exchange currencies, do deals automatically go through XRP? The most important question is whether the price of XRP can change on a secret ledger. This is where Ripple's top cryptographer, David Schwartz, stepped in and made everything clear. Even though he said it many times, and in many ways, people still take it in a different direction. There is just one XRP. There is only one XRP. There is no such thing as a private or public XRP. XRP can only live on the XRPL mainnet and no other record. Even though sidechains, private copies, and CBDC platforms may all be based on the same code, they are not their own XRP economies. The only place where liquidity lives is on the main net. That brings us to the next big truth. On any private system, the price of XRP will always be very close to the price in the public market. David Schwartz used Coinbase to explain it perfectly. When you buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, you don't get Bitcoin on the blockchain. You'll be getting an IOU. It's easy to switch between them though, so the price is the same as the blockchain price. It keeps them in line with arbitrage. Private ledgers work the same way. Even if XRP was worth $10 on one ledger and $200 on another, trading would quickly close the difference, except when there were huge obstacles, capital controls, or something went wrong. On a private record, this is why all the XRP is worth $327,000. The story went so crazy because that could only be true if the system wasn't connected to anything else and couldn't move value in or out. But here's where the story goes wrong. Somebody says they saw it. Lou in a talk. Buren said he saw a secret XRP ledger with a price of up to $327,000. He says he saw it once during a bank test, and that these private ledgers are like small closed-off sandboxes where banks test their liquidity at very high prices. Let's go more slowly now. There are real stress tests. The things banks test aren't realistic. To show flexibility, they push systems to their limits. That part is fine. But it doesn't matter if the number that popped on the screen was real. It's important that there are quiet places. They are not part of the main net, so they don't have to decide what the market value is. This means they can fake any price they want. They are trying the capacity, throughput, and volume at very high loads. Here's where another big idea comes in. The coming together, not a direct merge like Ethereum, but a gradual change where private tests, private rails, and private projects start to connect to the XRPL's public liquidity. Now things quickly become very interesting. Analysts, people who work for Ripple, and people who have talked to the company personally, like Jake Claver, have all said the same thing. They are real private ledgers, but they are not their own XRP communities. They fly planes. They're play areas. They help banks get used to real liquidity on the XRPL before they move on to them. Real money will start moving through XRP when that change takes place, when private to public cash routing is normal. Think about this in simple daily language. There are separate ledgers for each bank in the world. They can make their own stable coins. They can handle business between themselves in secret. However, when they need to send money across networks, countries, or currencies, they use the XRPPL because it's cheaper, faster, and not based on trust. That's where XRP as the neutral bridge comes in. That's when the number really matters. That's when value finally matches price. And Ripple showed in their CBDC example that it only takes seconds to do everything from making new money to destroying old money and moving value between networks. Private to protect privacy, public to get cash. And since we're talking about cash, now is a great time to talk about one of the biggest myths of all time. Why do people keep fighting about whether CBDCs use XRP or not? What is the real link between private ledgers and public XRPL liquidity? Now, we can go straight to the next part. Let's clear this up for good, because this is where people get lost, fight online, and turn half-truths into full-on conspiracy theories. People think that XRP doesn't play a part when they hear that the CBDC secret ledger doesn't use it directly. Not right. Not at all right. It's pretty clear what it means. The CBDCs themselves are not given out as XRP. They are given out as independent digital currencies on private networks that were made from XRPPL's code. But XRP is the link when those currencies need to go from one country or bank to another or into a different form of value, because what else is there? A central bank in Asia is trying to put its full faith in a stable coin made by a bank in Europe. Not taking place. A private CBDC network that wants to get along with another private CBDC network. Good luck getting that together. The only thing that can sit in the middle, settle quickly, and not need to be trusted or authorized is XRP. To be clear, David Schwartz and the experts at Ripple have been trying to explain this for years. In the present day, most trades do not take place directly on public blockchains. A lot of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP transactions already happen off-chain, on exchanges, on internal books, and on private tracks. They only settle publicly when they need to. That's also where CBDCs are going. It's best to keep private ledgers. The public mainnet is used for fair settlement. The example is neither one or the other. Let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about very often. If everything settles in the end, Why do secret ledgers exist in the first place? Because banks are not like regular people who spend money. Investors in small amounts swipe cards. They listen in on phones. They pay small amounts. A lot of money changes hands at once in banks. They change the pools of liquidity. They even out accounts again. They move things around. They do towns overnight that can't be shared with the public at any time. What if your competitors could see exactly how your money moves inside your company at all times? It would be bad for business. That's why secret ledgers are important, not just nice to have. They're not meant to take the place of public networks. They are designed to work with them. That brings us to the main question that everyone always has. If banks use private XRP ledgers, what happens when they need to make them public? Do all of these secret networks connect to the mainnet in the end? This is where the talk about the merge starts. Another thing is that this is not a merge like Ethereum's consensus update. This is not a merge of code, but of functions. Banks get their own training. They test in secret. They do exercises behind closed doors. But once rules are clear, compliance frameworks are standardized, and cross-border interoperability is required around the world. Private test networks will start to connect to the mainnet on a large scale to access XRP liquidity. Like the early days of the internet, private internets were first made by businesses. Then, as rules came together, those private networks were linked to the internet as a whole. Private internets were still useful even after the internet came along, but the biggest value came when they linked. It's the same story with CBDCs and blockchain-based payment. This is why Ripple showed a full life cycle video of how to make, distribute, trade, burn, and settle CBDC. Not because they're taking the place of national currencies, but because they make it possible for national currencies to work well. During that demo, the secret ledger took care of creating new money, wallets, internal transfers, and destroying old money. The bigger picture shows up when you zoom out. The goal of these private trains is to connect them directly to a worldwide network, one in which XRP serves as a neutral link between all of them. And this is where the ideas about private ledger prices lose their way. It is not possible for there to be two types of XRP, one that is very cheap and one that is very expensive. That's not what I said. That's not just a guess. That's not talk for the group. That is the founder of XRP himself describing it. If there were two different prices, arbitrage would close the difference right away. Unless there were cash controls, unless there were limits on access, as long as nothing was seriously broken, the private price wouldn't mean anything then either, because it wouldn't show how liquid things really are. It would show a bubble that is by itself. We can see why David Schwartz used the kimchi price as an example. Because of capital controls, XRP used to trade much higher in South Korea. It wasn't because Korean XRP was different, but because it was hard to get or send. That's the only time when price split can happen. If someone says they saw XRP worth $327,000 on a private test system, that doesn't mean that's how much it's really worth. Whatever the reason, a price variable was set in a testing setting to see how well the system could handle being bigger. In fact, the first people to test any new financial tool often use values that are too high or too low. Systems are pushed to their limits by banks. They make models of high volatility. As much as possible is tested, because if you plan rails for global payment, you need to know what happens when prices go crazy, even if those prices never happen. Is that a hint at how much it might be in the future? Maybe in a roundabout way. The fact that banks felt the need to test that high shows they think the system can handle huge amounts of data and high cash needs. But that doesn't mean that number shows what the property is really worth now. The things Jake Claver said about this show this better than almost anything else. In fact, there is only one XRPL. The big net is there. Only XRP is stored on the main net. Just reading that line gets rid of 95% of the conspiracy theories. Ripple made copies of things with banks like Bank of America, Bank of England, and others. They are not substitutes. It's the same as giving a bank its own test computer to try out a business app. They are free to do anything in that sandbox. They can make the fake XRP price go up to $1 million. They are able to handle 100,000 transactions per second. They can exchange money, but that doesn't change the real wealth. it only gets them ready. Things start to get real in the next part. Something big happens when each private ledger needs to connect to every other private ledger in the world. This is because each private ledger needs to finally connect to every other private ledger. The banking system doesn't have a global settlement layer, interoperability, or a trustless bridge. These are all things that could be added. With its neutrality, decentralization, lack of country bias, and quick settlement, XRP is the only asset that was made from the start to play that role. When banks stop believing each other's promises, stablecoins get too disorganized, and private CBDC networks can't work together smoothly. XRP's liquidity pools will be the cheapest, fastest, and safest way to send money. That's when value changes, not in short bursts based on speculation, but in a way that is driven by usefulness. So now we're getting to the real endgame for private and public ledger convergence. This is how global roots will change, and it has an impact on XRP's role in institutional settlement. This is not advice about money. The real change will happen when people finally understand that what's happening now isn't a crypto trend, a bull cycle, or just more crazy hoax meant to pump up bags. What is going on is infrastructure related. It's everywhere. It changes the way value will move around the world for the next 100 years. And XRP is at the center of that reworking. Whether people want to admit it or not because of rumors, price estimates, or stories. It's because of the planning, building, and coordination of institutions around the world that took more than 10 years. This is the part that most people still don't get. If most people find out that the rails have already changed, the liquidity routes have already been standardized, and the settlement networks have already been turned on, it will be too late to catch up to those who moved quickly. And that's the reason why the biggest names in business have been quiet for so long. It's not that they don't believe in the technology or see the chance. It's just that they don't want to be heard when they're getting ready to change the world's systems. Do you remember how the internet looked before it became popular? Peaceful, technical, too dull, out of sight behind colleges, universities, research labs, and government projects. Then all of a sudden, it became the world's most important thing. Value transfer, cross-border settlement, and firm liquidity automation are all going through the same thing right now. This time, though, the change is happening faster, more smoothly, and with the support of every major world economy. The third part of this move is the scaling phase, which is where we are now. At this point, pilot programs go from being fun tests to having to be fully integrated. It is at this stage that compliance standards stop being regional and start being global. This is the stage where banks stop trying new things and start moving to new ones. At this point, tokens that were once thought of as speculative crypto assets turn into the main assets that make it possible for money to flow between whole banking lines. People aren't buying XRP because of all the hype in stores. It's becoming more popular because global banks have spent the last 5 years building up the infrastructure for compliance, settling, and messaging that makes XRP an important part of their liquidity stack. When institutions work together and regulators agree, the retail market has no effect on the result. Take a look at what we've already seen. Banks are trying out tokenized deposits. Governments are testing CBDCs. Treasury tools are being rewritten so that they can be programmed. Settlement messages are being changed from old forms to frameworks that are native to ISO, and Ripple is quietly being added to the level where real money is moved by banks around the world. Not money that doesn't exist, not flows of speculation, settlement amount actually paid. This is the real signal. People aren't looking for a coin to bet on. It wants to find a settlement asset that can be used on a large scale across countries in real time, with little to no friction and the highest level of efficiency. In that case, XRP is one of the few investments that fits. From the second phase to the third, institutions that stayed out of the way are now hustling. The organizations that didn't think digital settlement rails would be important are now rushing into the field. Institutions that thought they had more time are now learning that the adoption curve is speeding up without them. And while small investors are obsessed with charts, influences, and made-up drama, the real players are carefully locking in their positions in a quiet way. Some people are surprised by this change because it doesn't feel like previous crypto rounds. There isn't a huge shopping rush. There's no crazy bubble of hype. There isn't a clear surge in interest this time. It seems dull at first glance since it's not a shopping-focused event. It's a replacement for the global financial system by institutions. And institutions don't make noise. They build roads and bridges. They make people follow rules. Standards are made by them. And once those rules go live, adoption can't be stopped. Even more important is what's going on behind the scenes. The ways that cash is being built right now will not only be temporary, they will stay there forever. It is impossible to go back to the old method once a corridor switches to on-demand liquidity with tokenized assets. Banks don't go back to slow, expensive methods once they connect to automated settlement lines. When instant programmable cross-border messaging comes out, old tracks will no longer be useful. As soon as that happens on a large scale, XRP, the asset that powers the liquidity on those networks, becomes structurally important. But this is the part that really hurts. Most of the time, small buyers miss these changes. It's not until after the shift that they notice it because these kinds of changes don't happen with big statements. They happen with changes that you can't hear. There are new APIs, updated standards, revised compliance frameworks, direct connections, back-end replacements, and major overhauls of the Treasury system. They don't make the news. They build roads and bridges. The winners are chosen by the infrastructure long before anyone else knows there is a race going on. Take a look around now. Take a look at how the relationships are going. Take a look at the text that is being finalized for world regulations. Check out how liquidity providers, banks, custodians, payment companies, and market makers are all working together to make sure that all of their systems can talk to each other and settle transactions. It's not a coincidence. It's not an accident. This is working together, and cooperation between institutions is the most powerful signal that a market can ever send. We are in the space between moments. This is the part where everything is made, linked, and in place, but not yet open enough for stores to understand. The part where the value hasn't been priced in yet because most people don't understand how it works, technically. This is the part that only developers, integrators, liquidity engineers, institutions, and early users who see patterns before everyone else does can pay attention. These are the places where the chances not in hype, speculation, or chasing stories, but in knowing that the global financial system is being rebuilt from the ground up and XRP is right in the middle of those lines. The last part of this shift will be very powerful is when public access, institutional activation, legal clarity, and liquidity scaling all come together at the same time. The point at which the new system is the only one left. Whenever the market wakes up and sees that value has moved, most people don't know how close we are to that moment. Everyone will know that XRP will be used when it comes out. Everyone will wonder how we missed the signs. It will be easy to say the signs were always there, but they weren't in the news. They were hidden in the pipes.